Good afternoon. This is your weather briefing for Monday, May 13th. We'll start off with our infrared satellite image over the past 10 hours or so. And what we find were our high clouds moving offshore New England, but low clouds moving into New England and will be lingering throughout the day. So fairly low ceilings across Oxford for most of the day today. Our current surface analysis shows two main features of interest. One is a low pressure system currently over the Great Lakes. That will be moving into New England and then eventually offshore, and then a large storm over the North Atlantic. These will merge into one surface low as we head into Tuesday, and it will retrograde closer to the southern coast of Greenland. Meanwhile, our mid-latitude cyclone continues to develop and then push offshore just east of New England. And then at 48 hours, those features are still in the general vicinity, so potentially causing some issues both at our origin point in Oxford and then getting into Greenland. In terms of our sea ice and iceberg areas of interest, the sea ice is the area between the coast and the purple dashed line. And then between the purple dashed line and the purple solid line is where we have our iceberg concentration. The greatest iceberg concentration as well to the south of the flight route, but there are some icebergs along the flight route just after departure from Goose Bay. Sea surface temperatures are just a few degrees above freezing along the route of flight, and then our current sea state analysis shows that due to the very strong winds associated with the low over the northern Atlantic, we have some wave heights forecast to be 10 to 11 meters or 30 to 35 feet. That's a little bit east of the route of flight, but along the route of flight we could still see 6-meter waves, so about 20-foot waves between Goose and Greenland. Over time, so this is 48 hours out, the low will begin to weaken, which will also cause the waves to begin to weaken as well, generally on the order of about 2 meters or 6 feet along our route of flight. Our forecast freezing levels start off with freezing levels of about 10,000 feet near Oxford, closer to 5,000 feet as we get up toward Presque Isle. And as we move forward through the day Monday, overnight Tuesday, and then by the time we get to Tuesday morning, we see that the freezing levels have actually risen a bit in Goose Bay, where they'll be above 5,000 feet. But from Oxford to Presque Isle, still generally between the surface and 5,000 feet. Notice that Greenland also has multiple freezing levels on Tuesday, but then by 0Z Wednesday, we find that the freezing level is down at the surface in southern Greenland. So icing conditions will be a concern all the way down to the surface as we get closer to arrival there. And then throughout the day on Wednesday, again, the freezing level remains near the surface in the southern part of Greenland. The temperatures aloft, generally in the 20s and low 30s at 5,000 feet along our route of flight from Oxford all the way up to Greenland. And these will not be changing all that much throughout the forecast period from now until Wednesday afternoon. And our temperatures at 10,000 feet are considerably colder. A few locations with single-digit temperatures, but generally in the teens and low 20s. And again, not a whole lot of variation to this throughout the forecast period. In terms of icing potential, we will have the threat of some icing at the origin at Oxford. Between Oxford and Presque Isle, we have freezing levels or between the surface and 5,000 feet, and relative humidity values greater than 70%, indicated by the green shading there. The conditions between Presque Isle and Goose Bay are considerably better on Tuesday afternoon, with a higher freezing level and drier conditions along that route. And then for Wednesday, we see that there's moisture that begins to move into southern Greenland, starting at 0Z on Wednesday. Also some moisture moving just along the route of flight between Goose Island and southern Greenland. And this will, at least the icing potential in Greenland will remain throughout Wednesday afternoon. At 10,000 feet, we're still concerned about the icing conditions here in the New England area, going from Oxford to Presque Isle. again, better conditions between Presque Isle and Goose Bay, at least until Tuesday afternoon. Once we get to Tuesday about 17Z, some moisture moves into Goose Bay and creates an icing potential there that will remain going into Wednesday morning. And unfortunately, by Wednesday morning, again, the higher moisture content is also present in southern Greenland, which could cause some icing problems on arrival there, and that continues to linger through Wednesday afternoon. In terms of our current flight categories, the problem areas, again, are in southern New England. That will be true as we go forward in time. So if we look at our 6-hour forecast, we see some IFR and low IFR conditions across southern New England. 12 hours and 18 and 24 show a similar scenario. Goose Bay looks to be in good shape, and southern Greenland, we do see some MVFR, potentially IFR conditions at forecast hour 24. In terms of turbulence, turbulence generally, for the most part, not a huge concern in the short term, getting out of New England, but there will be some turbulence concerns as we get toward Greenland, where due to the increased winds associated with that low pressure center over the North Atlantic. And finally, volcanic ash. We checked the volcanic ash. There is no volcanic ash forecast throughout the next 24 hours. Looking at the surface winds a little bit closer into Goose Bay, as we head into Tuesday, we start with a right quartering crosswind for runway 26 that turns into almost a direct headwind on runway 26 by midday, by 15Z on Tuesday. And then as we go through Tuesday afternoon, the winds begin to weaken as we get into the overnight hours. And then eventually we're expecting the winds to shift to more of an onshore component. So they would be at that point favoring runway 08 by 15Z on Wednesday. And that should continue throughout the day, throughout the afternoon at least, on Wednesday. In Greenland, we have conditions initially favoring, and we'll have some tailwind going into the fjord, but the forecast conditions at the airfield itself would be an offshore wind, winds almost down the runway, runway 06 there, but they will be gusty. There were some wind gusts of 40 knots reported earlier today. So good news is the winds are down the runway 06, but they will be gusty. And then as we move forward from Tuesday morning into Wednesday, it's unclear whether the winds at the airfield will be more of an onshore component or if they will have somewhat of a crosswind component to them as well, as we're kind of in a complex pattern with the low pressure center to the south of Greenland here. If we look at the winds aloft, initially from Oxford to Presque Isle, we're looking at a fairly strong right crosswind due to the low pressure center just offshore New England. Between Presque Isle and Goose Bay, we'll expect again a fairly strong crosswind right crosswind that will eventually turn into a left crosswind near Goose Bay, and a left crosswind all the way from Goose Bay up toward Greenland as we move into Friday morning, and that will persist through, Wednesday morning through Wednesday afternoon. At 10,000 feet, there's a similar pattern, so we're expecting a right crosswind between Oxford and Presque Isle. Perhaps the wind's a little bit lighter throughout most of the flight, so that from a wind standpoint, that may be a favorite altitude. But still a fairly strong right crosswind between Presque Isle, halfway between Presque Isle and Goose Bay, that eventually transitions to a left crosswind as we approach Goose Bay, and then a left crosswind that strengthens during the day Tuesday and into Wednesday between Goose Bay and Greenland. In terms of your drop winds at Oxford, the winds were out of the east at 3,000, but they're shifting with height to south-southeast at 6,000, and then southwest at 9,000 and 12,000 feet. So winds variable with height here. And our METARs and TAFs across the area, the TAF near Oxford here showing that the ceilings will be below 1,000 feet with the chance for rain, potentially heavy at times, throughout the next 24 hours. That's all we have. Safe travels.